So today we are doing the October-November 2021 paper 1 variant 1. So let's start. One, it says a European airline opens a new route to Dubai. It purchases additional aeroplanes, rents additional landing slots, hires pilots, and buys back some of its shares to raise the value of the firm on the stock market. What is an example of the factor of production capital? Now, the factor of production capital includes tools, machineries, and buildings that are utilized to help in the production of other goods or the provision of other services. Now, for a teacher, the factor of production capital could be the desks, the textbooks, because those things help her provide the service of teaching. Similarly, for an airline business, aeroplanes, which help in the provision of transportation, could be the factor of production capital. So as per the options, A should be the correct option, aeroplanes. 2, it says which statement about the behavior of firms in a planned economy is correct. Planned economy means most of the decisions are taken by the state or the government, and most of the firms are in their hands as well. So the decisions of the firms will also be managed by the state. So A says firms are sent signals to produce through the price mechanism. Incorrect. It is in the free market economy in which the price mechanism is utilized to help in decision making regarding production. B, it says firms will operate in competitive markets. This is incorrect because in planned economy there is not enough competition, and the competitive markets would generally be in a free market economy. C, it says firms will attempt to make profits for the benefits of shareholders. Again, incorrect. In a planned economy, the welfare of all stakeholders will be maximized, not just the benefit of shareholders will be attempted to increase. So it is incorrect. D, it says firms are more likely to consider the private and external costs of production. This is correct because in some goods, such as demerit goods, the external costs of production are higher than what the firms perceive. So therefore, in a planned economy, since the government is concerned about all the externalities and the welfare of all groups in the society, and the harm that is caused by demerit goods, the benefits that are caused by merit goods, the firms in a planned economy will definitely consider the external costs and the external benefits of production. So D is correct. 3, it says the table provides information on entrepreneurships among males in 3 countries in 2013. What can be concluded from the table? A, it says in Sweden it is easier for male entrepreneurs to get training than finance. Let's say Sweden, the percentage of males with access to training on how to start a business is 61.6%, and the percentage of males with access to finance to start a business is 49.7%. So yes, there is more access of male entrepreneurs to training than finance, so A is correct. B says it is always more difficult for male entrepreneurs to get finance than training. No, this is incorrect because as we can see in Japan, finance is more easily obtained than the training. So C says Italy provides less money for male entrepreneurs than Japan or Sweden. This is incorrect because we do not know how much money do the countries provide to the male entrepreneurs. We just know the percentage of males who do get money. We just know that. We do not know how much they get, so we cannot deduce which country is giving more, which country is giving less. So C is altogether incorrect. D says Sweden has more male entrepreneurs than Italy or Japan. We do not know if which country has more male entrepreneurs through this data, so D is incorrect as well. A is our correct option for 3. 4, it says the diagram shows the production possibility curves of 2 economies, Northland Y1 X1 and Southland Y2 X2. Both economies specialize based on the theory of comparative advantage and trade with one another. What can be concluded from the diagram? So they've given us a diagram, Y1 X1, one country, and Y2 X2, the production possibility curve of another country. So It says both economies face increasing opportunity cost. A is incorrect because we know that for increasing opportunity cost, the PPC is like this. And for decreasing opportunity cost, the PPC is like this. Similarly, for a constant opportunity cost, the one for whom the opportunity cost is the same throughout the whole curve, for that PPC, the curve will be like this, a straight line. So A is incorrect. B, it says point P represents the final equilibrium outcome. This is incorrect because as we know that equilibrium in economics is a situation when the quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded. So since in the PPC we are only shown the supply, and when the production possibility curves which show the production, the supply of the country, so the PPC of two countries, when it intersects, it is not the equilibrium outcome. The equilibrium outcome is when demand and supply intersect each other. So since we do not know the demand, P is not the equilibrium outcome. C, says point R shows the total possible combined production of food and drink. As we can see, point R shows the maximum output for food from country Y1X1, and it shows the maximum output of drink from country Y2X2. So yes, this could be the maximum output between the two countries when the two countries specialize in the product in which they have lower opportunity cost. Since Y1X1 is more efficient in food because she can produce more food for lesser units of drinks as compared to Y2X2, which is efficient in drinks and can produce more drinks for less amount of food. So Y2X2 will specialize in drinks and Y1X1 will specialize in food. So when they specialize in these products, what will happen is that for food the production will be Y1 because that is where Y1X1 specializes, and for drink the output will be X2 because that's where Y2X2 specializes and allocates all of their resources to drinks. And so Y1 and X2 will be the maximum output after trade, and so R is the point at which the maximum output will be possible. So C is the correct option. And D, it says all points on Y1, X2 are only attainable through trade. So they say on this line Y1, X2, these points, all these points on this line Y1, X2 can only be attainable through trade. This is correct, but as we can see that on Y1, the country Y1X1 can produce if she specializes in food, even if she does not trade with the other country. And similarly for Y2X2, if she specializes in drinks, she can produce at X2 even if she does not trade with the other country. So the points Y1 and X2 specifically on this whole line Y1, X2 can be attained without trade. So this option is nullified therefore. So therefore C is the correct option for 4. 5, it says the supply curve for fresh fish shifts from S1 to S2 as shown. So they've shown that the supply curve has shifted inwards, which means a decrease in supply. So what is the possible reason for this change in the supply of fresh fish? A, demand for fresh fish increases due to promotion of the health benefits. This is incorrect because due to that the demand curve would have shifted outwards. The supply curve would not have been affected, so this is incorrect. B, favorable weather increases the quantity of fish being caught. That would have caused the supply curve to shift outwards, and since here it is shifting inwards, so B is incorrect. C, price of fresh fish falls due to a new substitute product becoming popular. A fall in the price of fresh fish will lead to a movement along the supply curve downwards. It will not cause a shift in the supply curve. D, it says regulations limit the number of fish being caught to prevent overfishing. This has caused the supply curve to shift inwards and decrease in the quantity. So D is the correct option. 6, it says when the supply of a good decreases, equilibrium price stays the same. What is the price elasticity of demand for the good? Since we know that for a perfectly elastic demand, the price will stay the same no matter if supply shifts outwards or inwards. So let's see, we draw a horizontal line, which is a perfectly elastic demand curve, and we write P here, which is the price for the product. If the supply curve shifts inwards from S to S1, the price level stays the same at P. So perfectly elastic demand is our answer. So the PED value of perfectly elastic demand is infinite as we know it. So let's find the answer. A, it says -1. No, -1 is incorrect. B, 0, which is perfectly inelastic, again incorrect. C, it says +1. It is incorrect as well. And D, it says infinite. This is the correct option. 7, it says what can be measured by cross-elasticity of demand. Cross-elasticity of demand, the formula for XED, cross-elasticity of demand, is percentage change in demand, quantity demanded for a product A, divided by the percentage change in price for product B. The product B can be a complement, it can be a substitute. So let's see the options. A, it says a change in real income as a result of a change in the price of consuming it. That would more likely be income elasticity of demand, not cross elasticity of demand. B, it says a change in the demand for a good in response to a change in the price of a complement. This is correct because we divide the percentage change in quantity demanded by the percentage change in the price of a substitute or a complement. C, it says a change in the price for a good in response to a change in the demand for a substitute. This is incorrect, as I've told you that the formula for XAD is percentage change in quantity demanded of A divided by percentage change in price of B. So it will be the quantity demanded that responds to the price. It will not be the price that responds to the quantity demanded. So C is altogether incorrect. And finally D, a change in the price of a good when the demand for it changes, completely incorrect. 8, it says the table shows the maximum price a consumer would be willing to pay for successive cans of fruit juice. So first 14, second 10, third 6, fourth 4, and fifth 3. The price of a can of fruit juice is $4, and having bought 3 cans, the consumer decides to buy a fourth. How does buying the fourth can affect his consumer surplus? So since the price of the product is 4 and the price he is willing to pay for the fourth can of juice is 4 as well, the consumer surplus will be 0, since consumer surplus measures the difference between what the consumer wants to pay or is willing to pay between what the actual price of the product is. So 4 minus 4 gives us 0. The consumer surplus will be unchanged as it was earlier. It will be the same right now as well. So how does buying the fourth can affect his consumer surplus? A, it leaves it unchanged. This is the correct option. 9, it says the diagram shows 4 supply curves. Which statement about the price elasticities of the curve is correct? Curve 1 has constant infinite elasticity. This is incorrect. As we can see, curve 1 is a perfectly inelastic supply, which means its PES value will be 0, not an infinite value. So it is incorrect. B, it says curve 2 has elasticity greater than curve 4 over its whole length. As we can see that curve 2 is more inelastic than curve 4, so the value of 4 will be greater than the value of 2. And they've said in the option B that the elasticity of 2 is greater than curve 4, so it is incorrect. C, it says curve 3 has increasing elasticity as price rises. Let's see, curve 3 starts from the origin, which means its PES value will be 1 throughout the whole curve as we know it. Because for every supply curve that originates from the origin, the PES value for that curve will always be equal to 1. No matter where in the curve you measure it, the PES value for supply curve that originates from the origin will always be equal to 1 throughout the whole curve. Remember this forever. And finally, D, it says curve 4 has decreasing elasticity as price rises. Now for a curve that originates from the y-axis, it will always be elastic and it will always decrease along the supply curve. So for curve 4, the PES value will be greater than 1 and it will be decreasing as we move along the supply curve. Similarly, any curve that originates from x-axis, the PES value for that curve is always lesser than 1 and it increases as we move upwards or along the supply curve. So for curve 2, the PES value will be smaller than 1 and it will be increasing as we increase the price or as we move along the supply curve. So D is correct. Curve 4 has decreasing elasticity as price rises. So since 4 is originated from y-axis, it will have a decreasing PES value. So D is correct. Then it says the diagram shows the demand and supply curves for a good in a free market. What can definitely be deduced from the diagram? A. All the costs and benefits of consumption are reflected in OP1. No, incorrect, because there are external benefits or external costs in some cases, such as for merit and demerit goods. In that case, the equilibrium price will not depict them because it just depicts the private costs and private benefits. So A is incorrect. B, at OP1, consumer expenditure is greater than the firm's revenue. It is incorrect. Consumer expenditure and firm revenue will both be the same, which will be OP1 multiplied by OQ1 for both of them. C, it says at OP1 the price elasticity of supply is equal to 1. This is correct because since the supply curve is originating from the origin, and as we know that any point on the supply curve that originates from the origin, its PS value will always be equal to 1. So C is correct. And D says the market will not clear at a price of OP1. It is incorrect. Since the equilibrium price is OP1, the market will clear at OP1, which means all the quantity that is produced will be sold. 11, it says the demand for a good increases. Under which circumstances will the quantity supplied of the good rise the most? So basically they're asking about a product that has an elastic PES value, which is that it will respond to demand more promptly and it will be more responsive to an increase in demand. So A, it says it is an agricultural good that has an annual growing cycle and requires a cool climate. For this good, the supply will more likely be inelastic because it grows only once a year. So if demand increases at a point in which it cannot be produced, in a weather in which this product cannot be produced, then the supply will be very unresponsive to the change or the increase in demand. Therefore, the PES for this will be inelastic. So A is incorrect. B, it is an agricultural good that is perishable and very expensive to store. Again, the cost of production of this product is very high, and since it is perishable, it will only be stored for a few days, and after that the firms will not be able to supply it even if the demand increases, so the PES value of it will be very inelastic. C says it is a manufactured good that uses unskilled labor and there is unemployment in the economy. So since there is a readily available labor in the economy and we require unskilled labor which is in sufficient quantity, so we can increase our supply in response to an increase in demand. Therefore the PS value for this product would be an elastic one, and therefore C is our correct option. D says it is a manufactured good that uses capital intensive production and it is currently at full capacity. The price elasticity of supply for this product will be completely inelastic, which means that no matter how much of a rise in price occurs, no matter how much of a rise in demand occurs, they cannot increase the production because firstly it is capital intensive and it is at full capacity. So they have to purchase new capital equipments to increase the supply, which would take a lot of time. So therefore it will be very inelastic in the short term, and therefore D is incorrect answer. 12, it says the diagram shows the demand curve and the supply curve for a good on which the government imposes a specific tax. What will be the result of this tax? Now here, as we can see, that demand is very much price elastic, so therefore most of the burden of taxation will fall on the producer, as we know that an increase in price for a price elastic demand will cause a fall in revenue. Therefore the producers will take most of the burden and will minimize the risk of too much fall in revenue, and therefore most of the burden of taxation will fall on the producers. So A, it says most of the incidence of the tax will fall on the producer. This is the correct option. 13, it says the diagram shows how a 10% increase in consumer income shifts the demand for good X from D to D1. So as we can see, the consumer incomes have increased by 10% and the demand has fallen in response to that. So if we apply the YED formula, we can recognize whether it is inferior good or a normal good. So to calculate the percentage change in demand, we take the change in the demand, which is minus 20, divided by the initial value of demand, which is 80, and multiply it by 100. We get minus 25%. So as they've mentioned that the rise in consumer incomes is 10%, so we divide the change in quantity demanded, which is minus 25%, by 10%. We get the answer of minus 2.5. As we know that the YED, or the income elasticity of demand value, for inferior goods is negative, this product is an inferior good. So they're asking which statement about X is correct. A, it is a normal good. B, it is a normal good. Both are incorrect. C, it is an inferior good with income elastic demand. This is correct because since the value of the YED is greater than 1, minus 2.5, and it is negative, which means it is an inferior good and it has an income elastic demand. So C is our correct option. 14, it says, what is an example of privatization? A, the sale on the market of a French state-owned power generation company. This is correct because it indicates the control of a firm from the state to the market, which is what occurs in privatization. In privatization, the state transfers a firm that it controls to the private individuals or to the free market, so that it occurs according to the market mechanism. So A is correct option. B, it says the sale of a privately owned water company to a German firm. This is not an example of privatization because it does not indicate a shift of control from the state to the private individuals. So it is incorrect. C, the takeover of French car manufacturer by the French government. It is nationalization, not privatization, because the state now takeovers a private firm, which is what nationalization is. So C is also incorrect. D, the purchase of a Swedish pharmaceutical producer by a large American pharmaceutical producer. It is again neither privatization nor nationalization. So A is our correct option for 14. 15, it says, what did Adam Smith mean by economy when describing his canons of taxation? So Adam Smith was a person who advocated the right way to tax, which included some canons of taxation on which the taxation policy should be based. And those canons of taxation included canon of certainty, canon of convenience, canon of productivity, canon of elasticity, canon of equality, and canon of economy. There are a few other, but just to give you the basic idea. So as from transportation in aeroplanes and in other transportation methods, we know that economic class is a different type of plane, which is generally for people who want to incur low costs in their transportation journey. So economy would mean that the cost is low. A, it says the cost of collecting the tax should be low. This is the correct option altogether. This is very simple. Economy means cost should be low, and this is what Adam Smith meant when he described the canon of economy in his canons of taxation. 16, it says a government decides to remove fees for higher education provided by the public sector and the private sector. What is the consequence of this policy? A, higher education is less likely to be provided by the private sector. This is perfectly correct, because if you remove the price, there will be no profit for the private producers, and this will result in very less chances of the private producers producing something in which there is no profit for them, because they generally are profit oriented. So A is the correct option. B, it says resources in higher education will be allocated through the price mechanism. Incorrect, because since the government has imposed a new price, there will be a shortage, which is an excess demand, because the price has been removed completely. There will be an increase in demand and a fall in supply, which will result in a shortage, and therefore there will be not an equilibrium in the market, and the resources will therefore not be allocated through the price mechanism in the private sector or in the public sector. C says the demand for higher education will be perfectly elastic when the price is zero. This is incorrect, because the elasticity of demand for education or higher education will be relatively inelastic, because people will be insensitive to the changes in price of acquiring education, so it will result in a relatively inelastic demand curve. D says the opportunity cost of higher education to students will be zero. This is incorrect. Opportunity cost does not always mean that you do not spend, so you do not have an opportunity cost. Opportunity cost can also be concerned with time, because if a student attends classes in the college, his time will be occupied and he cannot do any other activity in that time. So all those activities, for example sports or any other entertainment activity that he would have done, becomes opportunity cost if he chooses to attend classes for higher education. So D is incorrect as well, and A is the correct option for 16. 17, it says what would be the main effect of imposing an effective maximum price on foodstuffs. So when we impose a maximum price on foodstuffs like this is a supply curve, this is a demand curve, and effective maximum price would mean that below the equilibrium price. So like this, in this case the demand will be quantity demanded QD, and the supply will be quantity supplied QS. So therefore the quantity demanded will be greater than the quantity supplied, which means there will be a shortage in the market if there is an effective maximum price imposed by the government. A, it says inflation would rise. Inflation will not rise, there will be a fall in the price of foodstuffs, so it is incorrect. B, the price of foodstuffs would rise, again incorrect, there will be a fall in the foodstuffs price. C, there will be a decrease in the import of foodstuffs. This is incorrect as well, because since there is a shortage, people will have to import to recover that shortage and to fulfill the excess demand. So C is incorrect as well. D, there would be a shortage of foodstuffs. Yes, since the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied due to a lower price, there will be a shortage of foodstuffs. So D is correct for 17. 18, an effective minimum price is applied to alcohol in an attempt to reduce consumption. Why would the government not buy up any surplus created? Now we all know that a minimum price results in a surplus in the market, which is because if this is the equilibrium price P and the government raises the price to P1, what happens is that this becomes the new quantity demanded, and this becomes the new quantity supplied, which means the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, so there will be a surplus in the market. Because of higher prices, producers supply more, and due to higher prices, consumers demand less, which results in increased quantity supplied and decreased quantity demanded, and quantity supplied becomes greater than the quantity demanded, which results in a surplus in the market. So let's see. A, buying the surplus would be costly to the government. Yes, this could be correct. B says buying the surplus would decrease the incomes of producers. No, it is incorrect. Buying the surplus from the producers will make their income stay constant, so it is incorrect. C, buying the surplus would lead to a shortage. No, it would lead to a surplus. D, buying the surplus would lead to unemployment. It would not lead to unemployment, because now firms are producing more due to a higher price, and if they are assured that the government will buy from them, they will continue to produce at a higher quantity, which will decrease unemployment within the economy, because firms will have to employ more people to produce more. So D is incorrect as well, and A is correct, because buying huge amounts of surpluses will be very costly to the government. 19, it says a government plans to increase spending on education and training every year. Which diagram shows the likely effect of this increase on the economy's long-run output and price level? So if the government is spending on education and training, This will mean increased government spending will lead to increased aggregate demand, since government spending is one of the components of aggregate demand. So aggregate demand curve will shift outwards. And since the spending is on education and training, this will increase the productive potential of the country, because there will be more skilled labor in the economy, and this will shift the long run aggregate supply curve outwards. So let's see which option coincides with this scenario. A, the LRS1 is not shifting outwards, so it is incorrect. B, LRS1 is shifting outwards, but demand is not shifting outwards, so it is incorrect as well. C, LRS1 is shifting outwards, LRS1 to LRS2, and aggregate demand is shifting from 81 to 82 outwards, so C is the correct option. 20. What is disinflation? Disinflation is a fall in the rate of inflation. It is not a fall in the price level, it is just a fall in the rate of inflation. For example, if last year inflation was 5% and now the inflation is 4%, it means the rate of inflation has fallen, and we will say that disinflation has occurred. A, it says a fall in output. Incorrect. B, a fall in the price level. A fall in the price level would be called deflation, which will be a negative rate of inflation. It will not be disinflation. C, a fall in the rate of increase of the price level. The rate of increase of the price level just means inflation. So there is a fall in the inflation, it means disinflation. C is correct. 21 says, what best describes a country's terms of trade? Terms of trade is the average price level of exports divided by the average price level of imports times 100, which gives us the index or whatever. A, the difference between the volume of its exports and its imports. The terms of trade is not concerned with the volume, it is concerned with the price of exports and imports. B, the average price of its exports divided by the average price of its imports. This is the correct definition of terms of trade. 22. A developed country has a price inelastic demand for oil, all of which it imports. The oil producing countries increase the supply of oil. What is likely to happen to the developed country's rate of inflation and its balance of trade? Since the supply is increasing, this would result in a fall in the price level, which will reduce the rate of inflation. And as far as balance of trade is concerned, since the demand is inelastic, a fall in the price would lead to a fall in revenue, because for an inelastic demand curve, a rise in the price level would lead to a rise in revenue, and a fall in the price would lead to a fall in revenue. And since the price is falling due to an increase in supply, the revenue earned by the oil producing countries will reduce, thus the value of our imports will reduce due to that, and thus the balance of trade will improve as a result, since imports are reducing in value. So rate of inflation decreases and balance of trade improves. A is the correct option. 23 says country X and country Y both produce rice and tables. Half of their resources are used to produce rice and the other half to produce tables. The resulting output of each product is given in the table shown. What can be concluded from the table? If we divide 150 by 100, we get 1.5 ratio 1, which means for every 1 unit of tables, country X can produce 1.5 units of rice. And to calculate the opportunity cost for rice production for country Y, we'll divide 100 by 50, which is 2 ratio 1. Which just means that for every 1 unit of tables, country Y can produce 2 units of rice. So this means Y is more efficient in the production of rice, and X is more efficient or has a comparative advantage in the production of tables, because Y can produce 2 units for 1 unit of tables, and X can produce 1.5 units of rice for 1 unit of tables. So therefore Y is more efficient in the production of rice, and thus it has a comparative advantage in the production of rice. And X has a comparative advantage in the production of tables, because for every 1.5 units of rice, X can produce 1 unit of tables, and for every 2 units of rice, Y can produce 1 unit of table. Therefore X has a comparative advantage in tables, because for lesser units of rice she can produce 1 unit of table. Therefore X has a comparative advantage in tables and Y has a comparative advantage in rice. A, country X has a comparative advantage in the production of both goods, which is incorrect. B, country X has a competitive advantage in the production of rice. Country X has a competitive advantage in the production of tables, as we deduced earlier. C, country Y has a competitive advantage in the production of both goods, again incorrect. D, country Y has a competitive advantage in the production of rice. This is the correct option as we deduced it earlier. So D is the correct option for 23. 24, an economy experiences a deficit on the current account of its balance of payments. What could the economy do to finance this deficit? A, adopt a fixed exchange rate. If they had written devalue their currency, it would have been more correct, but they have written adopt a fixed exchange rate. It does not give us a clear picture whether we are devaluing our currency or revaluing our currency. So it is incorrect, therefore. B, attract more foreign direct investment. This is correct because if there is more direct investment from abroad, there will be more inflows into the country. This will result in the current account deficit to recover. So B is the correct option. C, it says decrease income tax rates. If we decrease income tax rates, people's disposable income will increase, which means they will demand more goods, they will demand more imports, which will further worsen the current account deficit. D says lower the rate of interest. If we lower the rate of interest, people will be able to borrow more funds at lower costs because the costs of borrowing will fall, and thus they will demand more imports, which will further worsen the current account deficit. And secondly, if we lower the rate of interest and the rate of interest in other countries is higher than in our country, what will happen is that people will invest in those countries to get higher returns on savings, and thus this will result in an outflow of hot funds from the country, which will further worsen the current account deficit even more. So B is the correct option for 24. 25, a resident of country X buys shares in a firm in country Y. The shares then pay the resident a dividend. Where are these two flows recorded in country X's balance of payments? Now, whenever a person in one country, for example, in X, buys financial assets in another country Y, financial assets such as stocks, bonds, government-owned securities, and many other. So when they buy it, it is recorded in the financial account of the balance of payments, and the dividend, since it is an income, it will be recorded in the current account balance of payments, because the current account consists of the goods section, the services section, the income section, and the current transfer section. So in the income section, in the primary income subcategory, it will be recorded the dividend because it is income earned on investment abroad. So therefore it will be recorded in the income section of the current account balance of payments. So let's see. Purchase, capital account, incorrect. B, again capital account, again incorrect. C, financial account, dividend will be recorded as primary income under the income section of the current account. So C is the correct option for 25. 26, what is the most likely cause of cost push inflation in an economy? A, an increase in the exchange rate. If we increase the exchange rate, imports become cheaper and cost push inflation decreases. B, an increase in the money supply. An increase in the money supply will increase the aggregate demand and cause demand pull inflation, not cost push inflation. C, an increase in the prices of imports. This is correct. When imports prices rise, what happens is that raw materials, component parts will be expensive, and since producers use them in their production process, the producers will pass on this increase in cost of production on towards the consumers, which will cause cost push inflation in the economy. So C is the correct option for 28. And D says an increase in the rate of income tax. If we increase the rate of income tax, the consumers will have less disposable income, which means they will demand less products, or the aggregate demand will fall. So D is incorrect as well, and C is the correct option for 26. 27, which changes are most likely to reduce the accuracy of the consumer prices index as a measurement of inflation? A larger sample is used in the household spending survey. If a larger sample is used, there will be less chances of inaccuracy. So A is incorrect. B, technology makes it easier for retailers to submit accurate monthly price data. Again, incorrect, because it will be more accurate, and they are asking what will reduce the accuracy of the CPI. C, households change their spending habits. This could be correct, because if households change their spending habits and consume new products and they are not included in the basket of goods and services, What happens if the price of those goods rise that consumers are consuming but are not included in the basket of goods and services to measure inflation? This will lead to an inaccurate rate of inflation being calculated. So C is the correct option. D, it says the weightings attached to the basket of goods are reviewed more often. This will again increase the accuracy of CPI, not decrease it, because if they review the weightings more often, they can determine the proportion of spending of consumers' incomes on each range of goods more accurately. So D is incorrect, and C is the only option which will reduce the accuracy of CPI, and therefore it is the correct option. 28, it says the government reduces the rate of direct income tax and devalues its currency. Which row describes the policy effects of these decisions? As far as fiscal policy is concerned, since we are reducing the income tax, this will mean that consumers will have more disposable income, and it will push the aggregate demand to increase, and therefore it is an expansionary fiscal policy. And since the fall in income tax rates also increases the money supply in the economy, therefore it's also an expansionary monetary policy. And as far as supply side policy is concerned, a fall in the rate of income tax will encourage producers to produce more, which will boost the productive potential of the economy, and a devaluation in the currency will result in more exports being produced, again boosting the productive potential of the economy, which means it is also an expansionary supply side policy. So the correct option will be D, which says expansionary fiscal policy, expansionary monetary policy, and expansionary supply side policy. So 28, the correct answer is D. 29, it says the balance of payments in the current account for Guatemala in 2011 was minus 1.6 billion US dollars, and in 2016 was plus US $1.0 billion. What is most likely to have been a contributory factor to this change in the balance of payments on the current account over this 5-year period? And now, as we can see, that the Guatemala current account was initially in a deficit and now it is in a surplus. So let's say an appreciation of Guatemala's currency. An appreciation will result in imports prices to fall, thus the demand to increase, and exports prices to rise, thus the demand to fall, further worsening the current account deficit. B, a growth of household incomes in Guatemala. If people have more income, they will demand more imports, thus this will worsen the current account deficit. C, a lowering of tariffs on goods imported into Guatemala. If we lower the tariffs on imports, the imports will become cheaper, thus the consumers will buy them more because now they are more cheaper, and thus the value of imports will increase, and this will further worsen the current account deficit. D, productivity improvements in Guatemala's export sector. If the productivity of the export sector improves, this means the prices of exports will be more competitive, therefore consumers abroad will demand more exports, thus the value of exports will increase, which will result in the current account deficit to turn into a current account surplus. So D is the correct option for 29. 30, and the final one, the government wishes to increase aggregate demand. Which actions would be most likely to succeed? A reduction in income tax and an increase in interest rates. Reducing the income tax will increase aggregate demand because people will have more disposable income. But increasing the interest rates would mean that the cost of borrowing will rise and people will demand less, thus the aggregate demand will fall. So this is not the correct option. B, a reduction in income tax and an increase in production subsidies. This could be correct because firstly, if we reduce income tax, people will have more disposable income and thus they will demand more, which will increase the aggregate demand. And an increase in production subsidies will increase government spending, which is also a component of aggregate demand. And when government spending increases, aggregate demand will increase as well. Both of these two steps will increase aggregate demand. C, an increase in corporate tax and an increase in government spending. If we increase the corporate tax, the corporations will have less disposable retained earnings and thus they will invest less, which will reduce the aggregate demand. And increasing government spending does increase the aggregate demand, but since the other half of the option is incorrect, or it does reduce the aggregate demand, so it is incorrect. D, an increase in value-added tax, sales tax, and a reduction in government spending. This is completely incorrect because if we reduce government spending, aggregate demand will fall. So D is incorrect as well, and B is our correct option for 30. So this was October-November 2021, paper 1, variant 1, and I did it as per the request of one of the subscribers. And if you have any confusion regarding any question in this whole paper, do let me know in the comments. And also tell me in the comments that which paper do you want to do next, so that we can do it and clear all the confusions that we have regarding economics and clear our MCQs paper with the best grades. God bless you all. Thank you. Take care.